right, welcome to the last section of these notes that we'll actually do a video with. There's one more section, but I'll leave that to you to take a look at if you would like on your own. This section is part 4 on bone fractures, various bone conditions like osteoporosis, and how we heal bones. So there's a whole lot of different types of bone fractures. Kind of 3 common terms you'll see is a transverse fracture. That's a fracture that's perpendicular to the long axis of the bone, like a transverse section. Okay. You can have a compound fracture where not only has your bone broken, but it has shifted enough to damage the tissues around it. So you've compounded the injury. Not only do you have a broken bone, you also have damaged tissues. And you have a simple closed fracture where it breaks, but it hasn't damaged the other tissues around it. It stays relatively in place. So you only have to worry about healing the bone, not necessarily all the tissues around it. Let's take a look at some x-rays of them. Comminuted fracture, that's one where you break not just a clean break in 2, but into multiple pieces. Usually happens when bones are more brittle. Same thing with a compression fracture, often suffered from falls, and more likely in people with osteoporosis or porous bones. Then we have a spiral fracture, which is a little more common to see in sports. Like if you playing football, you get tackled, somebody grabs your legs, right? They're grabbing here, you twist one way, and they twist the other, and you cause a spiral fracture. Painful, very tough to look at. There's videos online you can look at that. Does not look fun. Epiphyseal fracture right here, where the bone breaks along the epiphyseal plate, where there's still cartilage in there, where the cartilage is dying. We're trying to replace the bone. It's a little bit weaker than the bone around it, so it's not uncommon for that fracture to occur there in adolescence. One problem, if that does occur there, sometimes it can cause the epiphyseal plate to prematurely close or completely ossify and stop the lengthening of the bone at that one spot, which means you might have a limb that's slightly shorter than the others. So that's a worry sometimes with the epiphyseal fracture. Depressed fracture, you push in a flat bone. Green stick fractures, much more common in younger children. It's called a green stick fracture because if you ever, if you snap a dry stick from a tree, snaps into 2, clean, no problem. That's like an old brittle bone. But a fresh living branch that you try to snap, but it doesn't break. It breaks, but you can't pull it apart. If you want to break that stick off, you got to twist it and yank it and do this and pull it because you got all those fibers in there. Same thing. The younger you are, the higher percentage of your bone is made out of collagen fibers. Very tough, long fibers, difficult to break. The older you get, you kind of shift that composition of your bone, a little less collagen, a little more calcium. So the bones become harder and a little more brittle as you age. When you're younger, they're more resilient, more able to do a little bit of bending without breaking. But when they do break, you can get a green stick fracture where they don't break completely through, but they still break. All right, let's take a look at how we heal a bone. The first stage in a bone fracture is called healing it. It's called a hematoma formation. Hematoma means blood rushes into the area, right? So here we can see a simple transverse fracture across the bone. The periosteum is still intact on the outside, so it's holding itself together. Blood vessels are torn, get a lot of hemorrhaging, clotting blood forms at the fracture site, and the site becomes swollen, painful, and inflamed, which helps to get rid of any bacteria that might be in there and those kind of things. This is why, and it takes a little bit for the swelling to go down. This is why if somebody's ever had a broken bone, they'll go into the doctor right away and they'll put a temporary cast on for a few days, kind of just hold things in place, doesn't get worse. But they don't put the permanent cast on until this swelling, this hematoma formation has gone down. Once that goes down, they can put on a better fitting cast that you'll keep on for the long haul of the healing. Second stage is the Fibrocartilaginous Callus formation. So it's a callus made out of fiber and cartilage. So collagen fibers and hyaline cartilage. Just like when bones formed in an infant, it starts with cartilage that then gets replaced by bone. So we're basically repeating the same thing, but just in the broken site. So capillaries will begin to grow in. You'll get collagen fibers growing across, knitting it together, and some hyaline cartilage knitting it together. So we're connecting those bones, and we will start to form some spongy bone in there. So this is kind of like your own temporary cast. It's going to hold the bone together, give it some structure upon which to build the actual bone, but it's still very weak at this point. Okay, and that starts to form as soon as the hematoma starts to go down. Third stage would be bony callus formation. So we are getting rid of the haline cartilage and replacing that with bone. So we convert it into a bony or hard callus, and that begins about 3 or 4 weeks after injury until a firm union is formed 2 to 3 months later. This takes a long time. Okay, 2 to 3 months. Now, do most people, when they have a broken bone, keep the cast on for 2 to 3 months? No. Most of the time when I'm talking to kids how long they've had casts, they're talking 6 to 8 weeks on the cast, which means their bone isn't fully healed yet when they take the cast off. Why do you think they would take the cast off before the bony callus is completely formed? Yes, Wolff's Law. If you leave that cast on too long, you're not stressing the bone, so it won't heal as strong as it should. It will still heal. You'll still go on to the fourth stage, which is bone remodeling, where you build back in and get the bone looking like it used to, but it won't build back as strong as it should because it's not under any stress. Okay, so this is why doctors tell you to leave the cast on for as long as they want you to leave it on, because it's still pretty weak, even though it's holding together with that bony callus, at 6 to 8 weeks. It's not completely healed yet, which is why they say they want you to take it easy, maybe still use the crutches or wear the boot once in a while, those kind of things, because they want to slowly start adding on stressors to the bone so that it gets stronger and stronger. We incorporate Wolff's Law, a mechanical stress, to get the bone to heal in a strong way where it needs to be strong. But they don't want to push you too far that you break the bone again when it's still relatively weak. So follow your doctor's orders. They know what they're doing. They're following the physiology of the body here with Wolff's Law and bone formation. And the bone remodeling can happen for a significantly long period of time after that. And sometimes it will even be a little bit thicker there than it was before. Wolff's Law again. So that bone break, if it's allowed to heal properly, can be stronger than the original bone in some cases. All right, so now on to some homeostatic imbalances of the bones. One that we don't really see too much anymore in the States, at least, is rickets. And those are softened or weak bones. And we see that you get bowed legs, pelvis and skull deformities, rib cage deformities. It's generally caused by too low a level of calcium and vitamin D in your diet. So if you're not getting enough of both of those, you just can't build your bones as strong as you need to. So they will be soft, and then they'll malform based on different stresses that are on them. That's rickets. So you can solve that with a good diet high in calcium and vitamin D. That's why we started fortifying milk with vitamin D years and years ago. You'll see like whole milk is listed as vitamin D milk. They did that to help combat rickets. Osteoporosis, most people are familiar with that. Osteo means bone. Porosis means porous bone, so they become brittle. It's a group of diseases, not a single disease, a group of diseases in which bone reabsorption, outpaces bone deposition. So you're pulling more calcium out of the bones than you're putting into the bones. Okay. The spongy bone of the spine is the most vulnerable. So if you see folks who are suffering from severe osteoporosis, they'll often be hunched over as their bone is degenerating. It's most likely to occur in postmenopausal women. So menopause is that point where women hormone changes. They're no longer ovulating, having menstrual cycles, and a bunch of other changes occur, which we'll talk about in our reproductive unit. But a big change is the hormone levels that are changing a lot. And when those hormone levels change, they're messing with that primary function of hormonal control of bone deposition, gets screwed up, and so they're not laying down as much bone as they were when they were younger. And the bones become so fragile in some of the most severe cases that even sneezing or stepping off a curve can cause fractures. How do we treat osteoporosis? Well, the first two, basically adding calcium and vitamin D to your diet and increased weight-bearing exercises, right there, we are trying to force those negative feedback loops in the direction we want. So by taking in more calcium and vitamin D, we're upping our calcium levels in our blood, causing our thyroid to release more calcitonin, trying so that we try to pull that extra calcium out of our blood and stick it into our bones. So that's why folks who are at higher risk for developing osteoporosis, even if you're younger, most doctors will recommend making sure you got plenty of calcium and vitamin D in your diet to try to force as much calcium into those bones as you can, as young as you can, so that you kind of bank it up for the long haul there. And then increase weight-bearing exercises, so lifting weights, walking, those kind of things, where you're actually putting some stress on your bones. Not too much, you don't want to stress them to the point where they're going to break. But if you can get the right balance of increased stress, you'll also be driving more calcium into your bones. Okay, so we're going to use that primary and that secondary control mechanism to drive calcium into the bones where we need it. And that's something that anybody can do. The last two deal with medications that alter the hormone levels, so hormone replacement therapy, or some statins, which a lot of people take for cholesterol issues, can both increase bone mineral density because they're messing with the hormone levels. And that ends our written notes for this unit. Part 5, I've got some things that I'm not going to put on the test, things on bone markings like foramens and condyles and things of that. I encourage you to take a look at them, especially if you're going into a field that you'll need to know more about the bones. But we're not going to take more class time to do that right now. That's something I encourage you to do, but I'm not requiring you to. So I will see you guys in class later. Have a good day.